Thank you for that. You're getting lots of nice support in the chat from people who admire your work. And one of the questions is how dangerous is this for you both and for your colleagues? How obviously won't go into details about your security protocol, but covering these kinds of things. How are you in physical danger?
Brian could go first. I just have to open my front door.
Yeah. Everyone has had different types of security incidents that range from annoyances to things that can be scary. I think reporters are definitely in the line of fire in a country like this. I don't think that we are at the most danger. I think that the greatest danger is almost always to local reporters. The government is pretty systematic and methodical to focus on the ones who have the least sort of backing. So there's an investigative shop called Armando Info that broke a lot of stories about corruption. And they were effectively chased out of the country by one of the, well, understood to be by one of the people who was they were investigating, who is now in prison for violating U.S. sanctions, being held in Cape Verde. We have to be careful, and yeah, you always want to know who you're talking to on the other end. What sometimes you do have to talk to some rather sketchy characters. You have to know when and where to talk to them. And I don't know, Angus could add to this, but I also sometimes worry for the people we interview. And I know sort of, especially someone who's going to give you sensitive information, but I would also sometimes just worry about a person who is willing to identify themselves and say critical things of the government who might have a public sector job. As a journalist, you always want a person to, oh, here's my name and, this is what I do, and take a picture of me. And sometimes when you do that, you start to think, okay, you sure that, you're going to say this and, you could get fired. A lot of times they'll say yes. Frequently, they don't want to. So yeah, I always appreciate, the concern for us. But my firm conviction is that people here right now, there's a journalist who used to be, he started working for a political party, and he's been a journalist for decades, and picked up and thrown in jail on some kind of terrorism charges, and then amid a cloud of sort of homophobic innuendo, and still there. So it's a difficult place in that sense. Yes. Angus, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I definitely going to completely agree that I think kind of the local Venezuelan reporters are at most risk. I mean, I think for international kind of foreign journalists like ourselves, I mean, obviously, I think you always run the risk of just kind of running afoul of kind of local, local crime. Especially when we drive out to into the Venezuelan interior. A lot of these areas are well, I mean, they're either under control of kind of criminal groups, or you run into a military, some group of soldiers who are really kind of no different, and they'll give you plenty of trouble. And obviously, I mean, there's also the additional challenges to reporting, in that there's barely any kind of public transport. You've got to bring all your gasoline with you. Supplies for a few days. But saying that, I think, I mean, what happens with foreign journalists, if they truly kind of run afoul of the government, is that the government will then just kick you out, kind of unceremoniously kind of kick you out.
Unfortunately, they will frequently kick out the foreign reporter, and then the local producers who no one has ever heard of can be stuck in prison for weeks, again, because there's a very clear cost benefit analysis to that. Sorry, Angus, go ahead. I just wanted to add that.
And and yeah, and just to kind of match Brian's comments about, I think, especially in terms of the reporting that I was doing kind of in tandem with my colleague kind of Sarah Canosian on police violence. We were kind of extremely worried about any form of kind of retribution again being kind of carried out against the kind of the families that were speaking to us. And even I remember there was one place we returned to several times, and I think after the first or second time we went, the family told us that the police had then showed up and told them, don't speak to these reporters, or else. And I think and the families were then telling us, no, we want to speak out because it's important to us to for the public to know what happened. And it then becomes a kind of ethical issue which you're going to have to wrestle with yourself. I mean, that these people want their stories to be told, and sometimes they want names, or sometimes they do want their names to be kind of attached to these stories. But if something were to happen to them, then unfortunately that will be kind of on your shoulders. And indeed, actually, I think for a separate story, I mean, for one, there's a family who are kind of continuously being pursued, and I'm actually still paying for them to kind of move to shift location, kind of every now and again. So I think it is it just means that even when the story goes out, it's still something that you have to. The story goes out, but it's not really the end, and you still have to kind of to protect the people that spoke with you.
Yeah, that you actually anticipated my next question, because when I worked in Vietnam, there was so often we were protecting the people that we interviewed, even when, as Brian said, they were happy to tell their story and give their names. And often I just felt, we really couldn't reveal that. Is there anything you can do to protect them after it's appeared? You just said, Angus, you have to go back and find out what happens after the story appears, or nothing.
I think obviously obviously you can keep in. I mean, I do think sometimes with journalism, there's a sense that the story comes out and you can just move on to the next project and just kind of forget about people. But I've found definitely just kind of keeping in touch with people, making sure that you're available for their any worries that they have. And and if they think that there is a kind of a credible threat against them, then either kind of putting them in touch with an NGO who might be able to help them, or indeed kind of paying, or indeed kind of making sure that they can move to another location, with their family, so they can be more secure.